You're listening to How to Drink Less, and I'm your host, Adriana Cloud. Whether your goal is to cut back, take a break, or say goodbye to alcohol for good, this podcast will help you stop drinking on autopilot, learn how to manage cravings, and feel fully in control around alcohol. It's easier than you think. Listen on to find out how. Hi friends, welcome back. Today we're diving right in and we're going to be talking about feelings, what they are, why so many of us try to avoid them, and why learning to feel your feelings is one of the most important things you can do if you're trying to change your relationship with alcohol and drink less. And listen, I know some of you are groaning already or rolling your eyes, and I get it. Having feelings is cringe. Talking about your feelings is even more cringe. But we're going to be cringe together today. I'm going to hold your hand through it, and it will be okay, I promise. Now, I always considered myself pretty smart and emotionally intelligent, and I really used to believe that about myself. I am a poet. I've been writing poetry since my early teenage years, so 30 years and more. And I used to play the piano for a number of years, and these slight artistic inclinations gave me a reason to think that I was more sensitive than other people and more in touch with my emotions. But the truth is, I was actually terrified of my emotions and had no idea how to handle them. I thought of them as inappropriate and too much, a sign of weakness even, because I grew up in a culture that is quite emotionally repressed. And in my own family, no one was overly emotional. And for sure, no one talked about their emotions. So even though I was never told explicitly that emotions are inconvenient, that's what was modeled for me. And so the lesson I learned was that emotions are something you repress. It's not okay to show strong emotions, and it's certainly not okay to talk about your emotions. So even though I was writing my little poems about my feelings, I didn't really know how to openly talk about my emotions or even to identify them and name them. And alcohol was a godsend in this regard because it allowed me to escape whatever the feeling was: boredom, sadness, frustration, overwhelm, loneliness. Alcohol was a way to very quickly soften the edges and make that emotion more palatable and more manageable. And so many of us do this. It's one of the main reasons that people drink, actually, to escape unwanted emotions. And it's one of the main obstacles that people come up against when they're trying to change their drinking habits, because they wonder, how will I handle stress and overwhelm without alcohol? What do I do when I feel agitated or angry? What do I do when I'm bored? This is what people worry about, and I worried about that too, so let's talk about it. Now, what is a feeling actually? And I should say I use the term feeling and emotion interchangeably, and to me they're the same thing. So, what is a feeling? It's a physical sensation or a set of physical sensations that you experience in your body. That's it. A physiological reaction that your body has in response to a stimulus. That's what a feeling is. And we normally give a label to these sensations, something like anger, excitement, boredom, anxiety, calm. These are all emotions. And I should say, a lot of us tend to intellectualize our feelings. In this day and age, as a species, most of us are not very in touch with our bodies because we don't use our bodies in the same way that our ancestors used their bodies. We're not outside in the elements too much. We're not physically having to fight for our food. We're not having to physically defend ourselves from predators. And many of us, of course, not everyone, but many of us, we work with our minds rather than our bodies, which is to say, our labor is intellectual rather than physical. And as a result of all of these things, we are quite disconnected from our bodies. And that automatically means that we are less connected to our emotions because emotions happen in the body, not in the mind. This is really important, so I'll say it again. Emotions happen in the body. Emotions are physical sensations. And this might be a surprise for some of you. And it was a surprise to me because we're so used to thinking about our emotions. But thinking about an emotion is not the same as actually feeling the emotion. Let me give you an example. Let's say you come home from work and you find your partner watching TV instead of making dinner like he said he would. And instantly you feel annoyed. But instead of tuning into that feeling into your body, your brain launches into a monologue. Seriously? He said he'd handle dinner tonight. He always does this. He makes promises and then he doesn't keep them. He just must not care. And now I have to figure something out when I was already on my last nerve. And oh, why do I even care so much? It's just food. Who cares? I should be able to just brush it off. Maybe I am overreacting. Why do I always feel everything so intensely? What's wrong with me? I don't want to feel like this at all. Maybe I should just have a glass of wine to make this stop. So, this is what it sounds like to be thinking about your feelings instead of feeling them. You narrate, you analyze, you justify, you argue with yourself, and you judge the emotion while never actually dropping into your body to notice what that annoyance feels like physically. And why does any of this matter? It matters a lot when it comes to drinking because so many of us believe that we cannot handle our emotions and we need alcohol to cope with them. That's the story we have, that emotions are really hard to process if we're not drinking. And this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. The first time you drink because you're overwhelmed by some emotion, and you suddenly feel better when the dopamine floods your system, and you feel instantly calmer, and that warm sedative effect of alcohol kicks in, your brain thinks, "Oh, this felt really good. I must remember this for next time I feel something that I don't want to feel, and I must ask for a drink again." And next time you feel a pang of frustration or something like that, your brain reminds you that alcohol made you feel better last time, and so you drink again. Now you've reinforced the message that alcohol feels good in moments when you're feeling emotionally activated. And the more you repeat that pattern, the more you reinforce the belief that alcohol is a solution in those moments. Because your brain is a good student. And over time, two things happen. One, you've now created a habit because anything done with repetition, felt with repetition, or even thought with repetition becomes a habit. So the more you repeat the pattern of drinking when you feel a strong emotion, the deeper you groove in that habit, the more entrenched that habit becomes. And the second thing that happens as you continue repeating this pattern is that over time, your brain learns that alcohol is the only solution for strong emotions that you don't want to feel. You've blocked yourself from exploring other ways to handle an emotion, which gradually signals to your brain that there are no other solutions and alcohol is the only solution. That's why when you're trying to change your drinking habits and you hit this point where you're wondering how you'll handle bad news or a stressful day or the challenges of parenthood, your brain tells you that there's no way you can deal with any of that without drinking because you have not developed any other coping mechanisms. And this is why it is so important to learn how to feel your feelings without numbing them with booze or trying to shove them aside or avoid them until a more convenient time in the future. Because when you learn how to normalize emotions and let them move through your body without resisting them or fighting them or judging yourself for feeling them, then you won't be scared to face the world sober. Here's a little secret. In any situation, the worst possible outcome is a feeling. No matter the context, no matter how high the stakes appear to be, the worst thing you risk is feeling an emotion. Now, I'm not saying that feeling despair or intense fear or grief is pleasant. Of course not. It's awful. But if you trust yourself to be able to handle emotions like that and come out on the other side, then you can do anything. So let's talk about how to feel a feeling. You can do this with negative or positive feelings, and you could even do it with neutral feelings, though it might be harder to notice nuances there. So, at least while you're learning how to do this, it's going to be easier to practice with more intense emotions. So, when you notice you're having an emotional reaction to something, first things first, notice what's happening in your body. What do you feel and where do you feel it? A few days ago, I had a morning when I felt really anxious about something that I had to do later in the day. And because I walk my talk and I use my own tools, I did this exercise myself. I asked myself, what is happening in my body? Now, this in itself requires you to pause and tune inward, which might already be a challenge for some of you who are really disconnected from your bodies. But give it a try. On this particular occasion, I was working at my desk, and so I stopped working and closed my eyes for a moment and turned my attention to my body to see what I could notice. And I noticed that I was breathing kind of fast and shallow. I had this feeling of butterflies in my stomach or almost like a slight nausea. And I felt a bit of tension in my jaw. That's what I could notice. And for me, those sensations equal anxiety. And that made sense to me because I knew exactly what I was anxious about in that moment. I was anxious about the thing that I had to do in the afternoon. Now, there are a couple of reasons why you want to name the sensations that you're experiencing. Firstly, because when you name the sensations, whether out loud or in your mind, you're activating the language centers in the brain. That means that you're sending signals to a different part of the brain than the part that was activated feeling the feeling, which in turn means that the original feeling has now lessened in intensity because you're spreading signals to different parts of the brain. And second, when you name what physical sensations you're experiencing, you put yourself in the observer seat. You're now a person observing themselves having an emotion rather than a person consumed by their emotion. It gives you a different perspective on whatever it is you're feeling. It makes it less significant, especially if you can notice that the sensations are usually contained to certain parts of your body rather than permeating your entire body. And finally, making yourself name the sensations you're noticing in your body helps you to get better at this exercise. You get better at observing yourself and identifying what's happening. Now, sometimes you might not be able to really describe the sensations you're experiencing. You feel something in your body, but you might struggle to put words to it. And that's okay too. Again, this work gets easier the more you do it, but regardless of where you're starting from, you can still ask yourself some basic questions like, where do you feel something? Can you at least identify the part of the body where something is happening? For many people, it's the chest or the stomach or the throat, though, of course, not always. And it could be other parts of the body as well. But try to see if you can identify where in the body you feel something. And then you can ask yourself some questions like, is this feeling light or is it heavy? Is it hot or is it cold? Is it static or is it moving? Does it have a color? If it were an object or a shape, what would it be? There is no one correct way to do this, and there won't be one correct way to answer these questions. We're just playing here. We're just trying to put some language around the experience because that helps to demystify it. And if you can then try to name the feeling that corresponds to these sensations. Now, there are a lot of words that describe emotions in the English language, but if you want to keep things simple, here's the 6 basic emotions you can start with: sadness, happiness, fear, anger, surprise, and disgust. If you want to get more specific than that, of course you can, but sometimes you might not be able to name what the emotion is, even if you're able to identify the sensations that you feel in your body. And that's perfectly fine. Just stick to the sensations and name those. For example, My face is hot and my heart is racing and my fists are clenched and my nostrils are flared. Or maybe you notice heaviness in your shoulders and some pressure behind your eyes and a lump in your throat. Once you've identified the emotion, even if you haven't been able to put a label on it, but you've named the sensations, what should you do next? If it's really intense, you might want to do some nervous system regulation. Intense emotions can put the body in fight or flight response, which is a stress response when the body senses real or perceived danger. Basically, something sent a signal to your brain that your life might be in danger, and your brain reacted by producing different hormones that would help you to deal with the perceived threat and to increase your odds of survival. The main thing that happens is the release of the two stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, and that triggers other reactions in the body, including faster heart rate, higher blood pressure, faster breathing, tense muscles, and a few other things. It's basically your body preparing you to fight the threat or to run away from it. This sort of physiological response used to be helpful to our ancestors who had to fight or outrun predators in the wild. But unfortunately, our environment has evolved faster than our bodies. And now the same kind of response kicks in when our boss emails us asking for an urgent meeting or when you have to make a phone call to book a doctor's appointment. So, again, if you're experiencing quite a strong emotion and you feel this sort of intense physiological reaction, down-regulating the nervous system is the first point of order. The simplest way to do this is to take a few deep breaths where you make the exhale twice as long as the inhale. So you could inhale for the count of 2 and exhale for the count of 4. Do that a few times and then lengthen the breaths. So you inhale for the count of 3 and you exhale for the count of 6. And do that again for a few more breaths. Another quick way to calm down the nervous system is humming. I know that sounds super weird, but when you hum, the vibrations in your throat stimulate the vagus nerve, which is a major part of that part of the nervous system that's responsible for rest and relaxation. And of course, there are many other tools that can help you to calm down. And I teach my clients a number of other techniques to work with the body and knock down the intensity of an emotion. Because feeling your feelings doesn't mean that you have to stew in them, especially if they're really intense. And then once you've neutralized the feeling a bit, you can just pause and observe it. Again, notice where it is. Notice if it's static or if it's moving. Notice how it changes as you continue to observe it. Because here's the thing, emotions are actually quite short-lived. They move through our bodies like waves. The emotion appears, it gets stronger, it reaches peak intensity, it crests, and then it starts to recede. And some research indicates that each individual emotion passes through the body in about 90 seconds. 90 seconds, that's it, a minute and a half. Now, I know what you're thinking. Of course, we've all had emotions that lasted way longer than 90 seconds, but each individual wave of emotion lasts about 90 seconds. And then what happens is that another trigger might come along, which is usually another thought, and that starts another wave of emotion. So if you keep thinking about a thing that makes you anxious, like I was a couple of days ago, you will keep feeling waves of anxiety. But if you stay curious and pay attention to the sensations, you will notice that they're not constant. They change. And sometimes that fact in itself, that emotions are not constant and they do change, can be enough to offer some relief because you can remind yourself that no feeling is final. Every feeling passes, the good, the bad, and the neutral. They're all temporary. And another reminder you can give to yourself is that feelings are not dangerous. Your body is perfectly equipped to handle the whole range of emotions: grief, pain, happiness, surprise, anger, boredom, loneliness, excitement, and everything in between. That's what observing your emotions can help you to remember, that individual physical sensations are not dangerous. Let's take the example of shame, which is one of the emotions that we're least comfortable feeling. What does shame feel like in the body? Your mileage may vary, and it's worth saying that different people will experience the same emotion differently. So the way that shame feels to me won't necessarily be the way that shame feels to you. But when I feel shame, I notice heat in my cheeks, and my breathing is faster, and maybe there's a lump in my throat, and restlessness or a queasiness in my chest and my stomach. Now, let's pretend I was describing shame to an alien who's never felt shame. So I might say, I feel heat in my face. Well, the alien might ask, are you on fire? Well, no, it's just a little bit of heat in my cheeks. Is it dangerous? Is it painful? Well, no, it's just uncomfortable. What about the faster breathing? Is that painful or dangerous? No, not really. And what about the lump in your throat? Is that preventing you from breathing? Will you die because of this lump? Nope, I can still breathe. And the restlessness in the chest and the stomach, that doesn't hurt either. So there you have it. We've broken down the emotion of shame to its components, and it turns out it's not going to kill me. It might feel uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous. My body can handle all of these sensations without any problem. This is why it is so important to practice being in your body when you feel an emotion. So you can start to gather evidence that your emotions won't hurt you and they're not as painful or as uncomfortable as you think they are. Actually, it's our resistance to emotions that feels worse than the emotion itself. Because no one ever taught us how to feel our feelings, we're really uncomfortable with the idea of our emotions. And so most of us very quickly try to escape whatever we're feeling. We try to talk ourselves out of it, or we might judge ourselves for feeling the emotion, or we might try to just shove it to the side and pretend it's not happening. But trying to push aside your emotions is like trying to keep a beach ball underwater. It takes a lot of pressure to keep a beach ball submerged because air is lighter than water, so you have to keep pushing the ball down to keep it under the surface. It's exhausting, and at some point, you're going to give up or get too tired, and the ball will come up anyway. That's kind of what it's like when we are trying to suppress emotions. You can only shove them down and resist them for so long before they come out again. And again, I have so much sympathy for those of you who've never learned to feel their feelings and who therefore want to run away at the first sign of emotion. That's most of us, and I know this work can be challenging. But I hope what this episode has helped you to realize is that there's a huge benefit to learning to feel your feelings. The more comfortable you are with letting emotions move through your body without resisting them or judging them, without trying to shove them aside or fix them, the less you need to drink to escape them. I had to do this work the hard way once I quit drinking. I had to sit with all of my emotions. And turns out, when you've been hiding from your feelings for decades, and then suddenly you remove your shield, I'm talking about alcohol, of course, because that was my shield, you might then be surprised just how many emotions you actually have. But it does get easier with practice. The more you do it, and the more evidence you gather that emotions can't hurt you, the less of a big deal they become. That's how you build your emotional resilience. By observing your emotions and observing them pass through you and dissipate, and observing yourself still standing on the other side. Until gradually you start to feel confident that you can handle any emotion without requiring a drink. So let's recap. How to feel a feeling. First, notice where the emotion shows up in your body. Name the physical sensations: tightness, heat, pressure, heaviness, fast breathing, whatever is there. Then keep observing and notice how the sensations shift as you just sit with them without resistance. And finally, remind yourself that the emotion is not dangerous and it will pass. Emotions are just waves. If you stop fighting them, They move through your body pretty quickly. So next time you feel an emotion that you might normally be tempted to drink at, just ask yourself, what if I were willing to feel this? And let it be messy. Let it be weird. Just try it and see what happens. And if you do, I'd love to hear about it. Just send me a message and tell me what you notice. And if you're now at the point where you're realizing that alcohol has been your go-to easy button for tamping down uncomfortable emotions, I've got you. I can help. This is the exact work I do with my coaching clients all the time. I can teach you how to regulate your nervous system, how to get comfortable feeling your feelings, and build real emotional resilience so you never again feel like you need a drink to escape an emotion. If you want to chat to see if we're a good fit, the link to book a free consultation is in the show notes, and I would love to meet you and talk about this. All right, my friends, I will leave you here for today. Go forth and feel your feelings, and I'll talk to you next week. If you're looking for practical advice for how to say no to alcohol and say yes to yourself, you will want to get on my email list. Sign up to receive my free guide with 7 steps to kickstart your sobriety. The link is in the show notes, so go and grab it now, and I'll see you soon in your inbox.